They're trying to keep your history away from you. And we got a special guest to talk about that today, among other things. It's going to be a really dope show on the other side. Welcome everybody. Right. You're not supposed to see the guest yet, but welcome everybody to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Jubilee. That's David. Our fearless friend with the blackest hair that you've ever seen. Our supermodel friend is somewhere doing supermodel things, living his life as he's cousins with James Bond. I bet you didn't know that. I bet you didn't know that he goes on those type of secret adventures and missions. But David Castillo is our host today and has an incredible show. So, David, why don't you take it away, good brother?
All right. Great. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We have a special show for you today. We're going to do our quick check-ins, and then we're going to jump into the topic at hand. Today, we are going to be talking about a particular area in California, a city, a school district known as Temecula. And its associated school district, and what's happening there locally with a recall of 3 current democratically elected school board members. And we'll be diving into all of that, like what is a recall, what does it even mean, where else have they happened, and what is this one all about? So it's going to be an interesting hour, so buckle up. And we will do our best to engage with everybody in the chat. But let's do quick check-ins. Let's keep them brief and concise.
That was for Charles, not me.
Absolutely. That was absolutely for Jubilee. Yeah. That was absolutely for Jubilee. I'm doing well. I'm even better now that I see Toya's face here. Toya, we are due for a call. Give me a call. I miss you. I have updates for you. But yes, that is my check-in. Precise and concise. Yes.
I mean, it's the first time for everything. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be conciser, huh? And I'm also going to create a word. I'm doing great. I have cookies, and I'm excited for today's show.
That is killing her. It's killing her, dog. Like, it's killing her, David. She's like, she wants to say more so bad.
It's going to keep showing up throughout the show in like underhanded, passive-aggressive comments.
Exactly. That was the most passive-aggressive, like, welcome ever. It's all
From
good.
The king of passive aggressiveness. I love it. David, how you doing today? How you feeling?
Okay, I'm doing good. I'm excited about today's show. I don't have too much on the personal front to talk about, but I'm excited to jump into today's topic. I have a personal connection to today's topic in a number of different ways. I was a poli-sci major my undergrad, as was Dr. Cole. And so, like elections, political action committees, recalls, all this stuff is always very interesting to me. And I also have a personal connection via a family member who happens to live in Temecula, California. And I saw some of her Facebook posts kind of popping up here and there. And I'm like, something's going on there. I got to check it out. And sure enough, I peeled the onion back a little bit, the layers of the onion, and we've got some stuff happening in Temecula, California. And so to talk about that, we were able to connect with the leader, one-man band who has kind of who's formed a political action committee called the One Temecula Valley PAC. You can find them on all social media. His name is Jeff Pack, and he's here today to talk with us about all things that are happening in Temecula. So welcome, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, guys.
All right. And, in fairness to everybody on the screen, let's do a check-in with Jeff, too. How are you doing? How are you doing today, Jeff? What's happening in your world?
Well, I'm going to apologize for clearing my throat a lot because we had a big weekend of recall signature gathering. We had like about 100 volunteers. We got about 700 We got several hundred signatures this week, but it was 97 the first day and it was 67 the next day. So I think it's wreaking havoc on my head. But it's kind of like any other day around here in Temecula. It's been you never know what's going to happen next, what somebody's going to say next, what they're going to put on an agenda. And as a political action committee, we're not solely focused on the school board recall. We are also focused on City Hall, which has a city council, which has a fairly famous city council member that does some crazy stuff. And so we're keeping an eye on a lot of fronts. So it's always a busy day, but I'm okay. I'm good. We're feeling positive.
All right. So just to give our audience members some background, I think Temecula is it's an interesting place. When people think about California,
it's big. So
yeah, exactly. And so they always think California is like this left-wing liberal place and nothing works. And we're losing millions of people to Texas and other states. I mean, we've definitely lost some people, but California is actually quite diverse, very diverse in all shapes, in all different ways, and that includes politically and political, culture-wise too. So can you give us a little bit of the background and the context of the kind of area that Temecula is, and maybe how it's changed over the last I don't know how long you've been there for, 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, I've been here off and on, once off for 20 years, and I was a journalist here and around the area for 25 years. So I know the area pretty well, and I've seen it grow. It's primarily still a bedroom community in a lot of ways. People that commute into Orange County, LA, San Diego. Housing prices are a little bit better here than they are in some of those places like Irvine and LA and San Diego. I mean, especially. And a lot of families move here for the schools, it's a safe community. It's got great amenities. It's got parks. Everything's pretty clean. It's pretty boring for the most part. We have a wine country that we're fairly well known for. Does $1 billion in tourism.
Oh, wow.
But the school districts here, Temecula and Murrieta, right next to it, are two of the tops in the state as public education goes. And that's primarily why people move here. That's why I moved here. I moved here first for my kids to go to school here. And then with my bonus kids, we moved back from another area because we felt like they needed to go to these top quality schools as opposed to where they were going. So it's a great little community it's getting more diverse every single day. Politically speaking, I'm not sure where we're at yet, but my street in particular is just we love it because there's just all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. We've got people from Detroit, we've got Marines because they're next to Camp Pendleton. We've got 3 sets of gay couples on the street. We've got all kinds. And so we're seeing this more and more throughout our community. And I think that's important to keep in mind while we're discussing the issues today.
Awesome.
Basically, your community looks like America is what I'm hearing. It's like a mix of everybody, and it's not like super right wing, super left wing, this, that, and the third. That's how I'm, as somebody who doesn't know you or the area very well, that's how I'm hearing it. Is that correct? Or
yeah, it's getting there. I mean, I would say it was a conservative area for a long time. It's kind of the beginning of the central desert of up into Riverside, San Bernardino, and all the way up. And so, historically, but it's grown from when I was in high school in Fallbrook, which is just over the hill. We didn't ever come to Temecula, and that was 1988. And now there's 110,000 people, and all the people from Fallbrook come to Temecula all the time. So it's completely shifted the way this community has grown. And really, that's a credit to the way the city was built, right? Like they were open to and developed the city pretty well. We got a ton of traffic that I know people don't love, but it's a byproduct of having a city that's active and vital and has some vitality to it.
Awesome. So you have 110,000, and I'm sure it's a lot of young people, a lot of students in K-12 in the school district. I'm sure you've got some private schools there too. But what we are talking about today is is how Temecula is kind of being impacted by some of the larger kind of national political trends, right? We've talked on this show about what's happening nationally. We've talked about book bans. We've talked about some of the gender ideology things that are happening across the country. We did a whole show on Moms for Liberty, and we should probably do a show about school board elections that are being impacted by the Democratic Socialists of America too, right? The other end of that same coin. But we're talking about Temecula today, and so can you kind of walk us back to like when you started to see some of the changes in terms of the nature or the composition of the school board? What was the play there?
Well, we'll go back prior to the last election. I was coming out of journalism. I had seen a lot of this shift in local politics starting to build, right? And really, I should say this, I should preface this by One Temecula Valley PAC is a nonpartisan group that is focused on local governance, right? Mm-hmm. It's about good governance. These are nonpartisan seats. These are not blue seats. They're not red seats. You don't, when you vote for them, it doesn't say Republican or Democrat. The reason for that is there's a very good reason why all of these city council school boards do not have those labels attached to them. It's because they don't come into play typically. Well, we started to see a lot of that come into play when COVID hit, the masking, the anti-Gavin Newsom stuff. When we started to see a lot of these candidates start to label themselves as conservatives or MAGA Republicans or whatever they were. And then what happened was there was a local church leader who decided to start a political action committee that was Take Back the Public Square. Had some really dangerous sort of rhetoric as far as LGBTQ people and sex education in schools, a lot of the fear-mongering stuff that we were seeing at the national level, and it mostly aligned with all the Michael Flynn rhetoric that we've heard for the last couple of years. And so that was their goal. And so what happened was our local incumbents had no idea this was happening. They just were not prepared for it at all. And really, when you go after school boards, you're going after a soft target, right? You're not going after a city council person or an assembly member or a supervisor. Those are politicians. Typically, the people that sit on school boards are former teachers, interested parents, somebody that has some connection to education. And so they went after these people pretty rough. They went after them pretty hard, blaming them for kids having to wear masks and having to all these, CRT, all that other stuff. And they campaigned really hard and they raised a bunch of money. We formed the PAC very late, like in September, and just basically tried to put out a slate of candidates that we supported. And that was about it.
What was the election? So you started the PAC in September. And when was the election? When was the election? So
November.
Oh, so you had a 2-month runway.
Yeah. So we had 4 seats up and they got 3 of them.
That sounds familiar. Charles and I have done something similar, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got out of journalism and pivoted in my career, and I was like, I just looked around for people and I said, I know there's money out there to help fight this. I know there's just nowhere for it to go. And so I reached out to a couple of people. I reached out to, some former mayors and said like, hey, how do we do this? And I found a partner in David Maddox who said he'd do all the treasury stuff. He's about the smartest person I know. So he handles all the codes and all that kind of stuff. And I do a lot of the creative stuff. And he, it just so happens we jumped right into the fire. Like December 11th is when they, walked in, swore into the oath into office and banned CRT. I walked right in and there's about 300 people in the audience and it was wild. And I'd never seen a school board meeting like that in my life. And they haven't stopped for 11
Okay. So yeah. So let's slow down a little bit here because this is good stuff. So you had an election last year, right?
Yep, 2022.
Okay, 2022, and 3 seats were taken up by this kind of new slate, right?
And 2 in Marietta.
Okay, 2 in Marietta. So, I guess my question is like, how do they go from getting elected to getting an item on the agenda? Was there public engagement around the banning or even engaging in the topic of like understanding what critical race theory is? Or did it just end up on the agenda and they had 4 votes out of 7, and that was the end of the story.
So there's 5 board members. Yeah, they put it on the agenda. They only needed 3. They had all 3. They plagiarized a resolution that was put forth in Paso Robles, basically, and I mean it's word for word, by a board member or a school board member up there who has since been and voted out after a 2-year term. And I forget his name, Chris Arends. He goes around and teaches about the dangers of CRT. So that got passed. Like night 1, there was public comment. Like obviously we're ready for it. We know stuff's coming down the pike. We have our talking points and we go up and we express them. And it was a very long meeting. I think it went till 11:30. The first meeting was about a 6.5-hour meeting, as most of them are. So, there's only so many things you can do when you have a voting block like that, and they're just going to pass it no matter what. I mean, sight unseen. Our biggest argument is with all of this is like, you haven't even stepped 1 foot on a campus. You don't know any teachers' names. You don't even know who's in the audience talking to you, or who's sitting next to you on the dais at the district level, and you're banning CRT.
Yeah,
and you're this sort of gray language that puts teachers in a precarious spot, right? Like, how's this going to be interpreted? Is my job in jeopardy? Is it going to take 1 kid to say, I felt bad learning about slavery, for your job to be in jeopardy? So there's a lot of that included in it.
I definitely want to take a pause here, and I want to hear because we've done several shows and touch upon CRT, and even like the name of this show, the South Star Classroom, just to give you some context, is typically in education settings or nonprofit or even corporate, we're always talking about what is the North Star? When are we going to get there? When are we going to know it? But for us on this show, we remain focused on young people and communities that are furthest from opportunity. And so historically for us, that means Black and brown. And so instead of focusing on the Northern Star, we focus on the Southern Star, where most of our people are. So that for us is the kind of orientation of the South Star Classroom. So I find it interesting that was their first act to kind of, it's very easy. You can get something on an agenda, you can vote on it, but like, what does that mean for like curriculum and instruction and the superintendent to carry this out? It's a big lift, but I want to get Jubilee and Charles' take on what they've heard so far.
You're muted. Oh, since our guy isn't here, our other host always talks on mute, and Jubilee misses him, so he wanted to do it. Go ahead.
You're doing just what David said you would. You see. Anyway, I'm so happy you're here, Jeff. I really have questions. Like, one is, do you have allies, in other states? Like, who's doing this work in other states? That's question 1. And question 2 is, what do you think is like sort of what do you think is the catalyst when it comes to defeating all of this foolishness surrounding CRT, all of the fear surrounding CRT? Like, what do you think would be the catalyst that would cause sort of nationwide change or shift in perspective amongst these people? And I know it's a loaded question because I don't believe it's one thing. But if they put you on the floor one day and said, we're going to give you 1 shot, like what would you say? Like, what is that thing?
I wouldn't know where to begin. Obviously, this is such a big. When it comes to CRT, it's very vague, right? Like I can tell you exactly. Well, CRT is not taught; it's a collegiate level class, and blah 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 blah. What they mean by CRT and what we mean by CRT or critical race theory, and that whole train of thought or theory, as it's described. It's difficult to reach people when, and I think this is the crux of the problem, and I'll just be honest, when politics and religion are so closely aligned, it's really difficult to get past some of this. What we're finding is a lot of the people that we're talking to out in the community about, and we try not to get too in depth on the conversation about CRT or LGBTQ, because we just want signatures at this point, but we try to broach those subjects. And when they ask us about it, it's sort of a confusing place to be. I mean, I know from the Black community here in Temecula and the people that are involved with us, it's incredibly done incredible damage to them in their place here in society, and it's, boy, I mean, for a community that felt so cohesive, to be punched in the face day one like this with this this idea that little white kids are feeling bad in their classrooms is so incredibly disappointing, when it just took one adult to tell them that they should feel bad. And that's essentially what's been happening here. And so, no, I wish, Jubilee, I was smart enough to do that, have a magic bullet to fix it and turn people around. But I think you're right. It goes from a lot of different places. And when there are religious organizations that are willing to go down that route and others that are not, it makes it really hard. So, when you have one teaching about these things and the others that are avoiding it like the plague, it's like, come on, guys, like, go help us out here. Let's get back to being about truth and honesty. And this is not honest or truthful. So
have you seen any movement around just like the historical context, right? Like, let's forget about CRT for a second, but like not really. Do you think that there would be more traction if it was solely historical? Like, look, this is what happened in 1492. Like, it's historical. We can find it. It's documented, right? Like, we're not talking about politics or religion. We're just talking about facts, right? That these folks were brought on over, right, from West Africa and all these different places into the New World. And this is what history says happened on this soil. Do you feel like that might gain more traction?
No, not with them. No, absolutely not. I mean, they brought Chris Arends down here, the guy who wrote the Paso Robles thing, and they paid him $15,000 and had teachers come and take a time off, and they had to pay. We had basically paid about $60,000 to have him teach teachers about why CRT is bad. I had 4 different college level professors debunk this thing line by line. I showed it to each board member and I said, look, these are the people that have been teaching this and are experts in this field. And they just looked at it and said, now they're brainwashed. I mean, just flat out to my face said, well, you're the one that's brainwashed if you believe all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what do you say to that?
Right. I mean, even in that, I think, Julie, I think you're a better person than I am. Like, I mean, to even get that benefit of the doubt, like, about history, I think, I wrote this up into a question, but I want to comment just on our last piece. I see CRT as a catch-all for people that feel like they're losing power and control. And they feel like anything gets wrote up. If there's anything about LGBTQ, if there's this, and then you can find extreme examples online, and everything just becomes a big blur. And people feel like they're being relitigated as being racist or sexist or homophobic and all that stuff. So anything touching that makes my kid feel bad, well, damn it, that's CRT, right? But I guess my question and my comment around what you were saying is, as David alluded to, he and I ran a pack here in Oakland, and in Oakland, the politics were very different. It was just that wasn't as much of our issue, even though I'm sure there is an anti-CRT group that's bubbling. It's still the Bay Area, so to speak. So, they're not as bold to say those things out loud. They're getting more bold, but that's not their thing. Ours was kind of more so with union and traditional schools, charter school issues, and, bastardizing and kind of alienating those kids. So I was going to ask you, what role was the unions playing in this? And it seems like the roles would be somewhat reversed than what we had to deal with animosity from our union. And David and I were actually able to get them to take some stuff down that they were saying. But it seems like unions across the country have been a little bit more on like, nah, we want to teach real history. We want to actually do these things. So what was your experience with how was your union? What role did they play in all of this, and where did they land?
Oh, great question. Night one, teachers showed up at that first meeting, especially for the teachers. And to be fair, the TVEA Educators Associate, they signed on to this recall at 90%. There's a group of like 50 people who don't feel that they should be involved in this, but we have overwhelming support from the local teachers to proceed with this recall, and they typically show up at every board meeting. If you go look on YouTube, they're the people in the blue shirts. and they show up and they're outspoken.
Yeah.
You know, they really are. They care. Again, this is an award-winning school district. You don't get that, you know, by it's teachers that drive that. And so you have good people that have been here a long time that have taught kids very, very well, and they're going to stand up for it at this point, and they're doing that.
And Jeff,
So
I just wanted to clarify a few things for our audience. So the people who have been recalled are these folks that are anti-CRT and passed this thing. Is that the people that's being recalled right now?
Yeah, I'm in marketing, so we call it recall all three. So
got you.
The people are like, well, strategically, you should only try to get one. And I'm like, well, pick which one do you think deserves to stay?
Aim high. Yeah, aim high.
None of them deserve to stay in our place. So we're going to go where the data takes us. And right now we have one that's clear in the lead, and we're doubling down with the help of, the support of TVEA and the California Teachers Association, which is also signed on to this. So we have the support of both of those, and we're hitting it real hard right now.
And Jeff, I'm just getting clarity. So I clarified that, and then the other thing I was clarifying too. When I talk about unions, and this is I think David will appreciate this. When we were in that battle, we separate the apparatus that is the union from actual teachers. But we have a very powerful union leadership in Oakland. Like, it's very, very powerful. So it's a fully different context. But I try not to conflate those two. But I'm really happy that both your union and those teachers are out there supporting you. I just wanted to get that clarity for the people listening.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, the last board meeting we had, the board president attacked the TVEA president with his board comments at the end, screaming and yelling at him.
That's always a bad move.
To his credit, he went back at him.
You can't win. Yeah, you can't win.
And the union president went back at him, and they had a little screaming match after the end of the meeting. And I'm and I tell him, I didn't know Edgar before all this. His name is Edgar Diaz, and he's like a rock star in the way he conveys on behalf of his union. He's great, and to see him, be put under the spotlight, and they've been attacking him for the last 2 weeks, attacking the union, trying to get people to leave the union, attacking him personally, and to see him stand up for what's right is, really. It helps. It helps us. Like, we're just people. Like, I got a day job, but to see people who are teachers that are also going to get out there and walk with us that's incredible for us. So they're doing it.
Hey, Charles, I dropped a link in the private chat. Would you be able to pull that up on screen? And while you're doing that, I also want to point out what Charles was talking about earlier. Like, we've been involved in school board politics and elections and PACs for, probably going back more than 10 years now. But mainly our issue was it was centrist Democrats that thought charter schools, actually should be able to exist, versus hard left labor union, democratic socialist Democrats that thought everybody should get the same thing, even when that same thing wasn't good for all kids. So that was our fight back then. So it's been very interesting to see what's happening now. But if I were to ask, and just scroll down a little bit, if I were to show up to a school board meeting in Temecula now, I would probably ask the 3 sitting school board members and the new superintendent to say, look, your test scores generally are better than, and I know test scores are not an end all be all, right? But across California, this is actually good, right? You have some districts where you're talking upwards of 80% of children are not proficient in either ELA or math, right? And again, test scores are one data point. But then if you scroll up a little bit, Charles, here's the kicker. It looks good, but then we see the historical achievement gaps that exist in Temecula, that exist elsewhere too, in all fairness, with African-American children being the lowest performing group in the school district across English and math. You see the COVID dip, right? And so I'm if we're going to focus on something, removing CRT is not going to close the achievement gap. Removing any kind of curriculum around gender ideology or sexual education for young children is not going to close this achievement gap, right? And I'm sure that the conversation around literacy instruction and incorporating the science of literacy and the science of math instruction have probably not happened yet in Temecula.
Do you have any idea how badly I'd love to hear that at a school board meeting?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we have a phrase, and we did it with the current mayor when he was being reelected. It's called "Make Temecula Boring Again." And as a journalist for 25 years, I've sat in many school board meetings, many city council meetings, and they're boring for a reason, and they should be boring. Like to talk about literacy, how can we do that? It's not exciting. You know what we talked about at the last board meeting? 5G. About how 5G was causing cancer.
Oh, in the school board meeting? I mean, like
the school
the
board
conversation was happening there. Oh my gosh!
He wrote a dissertation for his philosophy degree, doctorate. His dissertation was about 5G and the dangers of 5G. So we spent an hour and a half of him telling us how he's the expert on 5G. Yeah, and then the question was asked. The question was asked: are there any more towers going to be built on school campuses? And everybody said no, and there hasn't been a plan for there to be. And so then it just ended.
That's wild. So were they handing out free little tinfoil hats at the school board meeting for people?
I may or may not have encouraged people to wear them when we knew it was coming. Right? We knew this was something, and then he put it on the agenda. We're going, oh my god,
wow, that's crazy.
So
okay.
it's so I wish we could actually talk about these things.
So the other big thing that's happened, which is pretty crazy, especially considering I think the challenges in and around education. Like we know there's a teacher shortage, there's a leader shortage, there's a superintendent shortage, right? The labor market's been turned upside down as a result of COVID and a lot of people leaving many different fields, but education has been highly impacted.
Sure.
So can you walk us through like the quick and abrupt firing of this last superintendent and what was going on there? Because that's a major decision. Superintendents don't grow on trees. And in order to actually impact long-term change in school districts, you need continuity. You need somebody who's been there and they can plan and they can look down the road, right? Unfortunately, it's long-term work.
Yeah. So I think we've only had like 5 superintendents in our history, 5 or 6 maybe.
Wow.
And Jody McClay was a very well respected. Didn't start with like full cooperation of all the teachers and stuff. They thought she moved up from an assistant's role, but she really stood out over her first 4 years. And to be fair, there were school board members that I spoke to of this crew that were like, we're not going to fire the superintendent. And I said, oh, you're going to fire the superintendent. And they said, no, there's no reason to. And I said, yeah, but if you're going to continue following this national playbook, that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. It's
wow.
a step in the process. And so I'll tell you, my honest theory on this is you remember when the social studies curriculum came up with the TCI book and the Harvey Milk, where they wanted to remove a supplemental material thing that about Harvey Milk. That was the big sticking point. It's why they wouldn't approve socials for K through 5.
So TCI is Teachers Curriculum Institute.
Right.
It's a curriculum that I've used. I'm a credentialed social science teacher. I think it's a wonderful curriculum. So they just wanted to like wipe out Harvey Milk, who was actually a real person that did real things.
That was in supplemental material that wasn't even in, it was something you could go beyond. If you wanted to go beyond on the subject, you would then refer to his biography in the supplemental material.
Wow.
So that's what the whole thing was about. Now,
real quick, for people that's listening that may not know, Harvey Milk is a very famous San Francisco politician who happened to be a gay man who was assassinated. And we have I think the SFO or he's named in a lot of stuff here in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. But just for people that may not be familiar with who Harvey Milk is, that's a very California name. Yep. So I wanted to make sure people knew.
He has a naval ship named after him. So there's a naval, I think, warship, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happens at that point is Gavin Newsom in the state of California starts taking, because now we're not going to have curriculum in time for kids, right? So that becomes a very serious issue, catches the attention of the state. At the time, the school board president, wasn't really his fault, but the board member that brought it up and called Harvey Milk a pedophile in open session. And then the board president reiterated that statement, and that caught Gavin Newsom's attention, who sent a tweet that I woke up to on a Saturday morning and about lost my mind, But at that point, it kind of galvanized them. Gavin Newsom in this state is such a tough word, because for Republicans, it galvanizes them. It makes them angry, and that's how it is. And so I think that's kind of what it did. And this one particular board member went from being on one knee begging the superintendent not to leave them, to firing her a week later. So it was a situation where it was like, we're going to circle the wagons and we're going to start doing damage. And it hasn't stopped since. So Jody was fired like she worked at McDonald's. They did not even give her an NDA, if you can believe it. And you guys well know, imagine firing somebody with your lawyer, a lawyer that they hired at 3 times the going rate from, it's a political operative essentially, in the room, did not give her an NDA and fired her. And she's probably got a multi-million-dollar wrongful termination suit in the works. So
as she should. Yeah.
Paid her $350,000 to go, and it's going to cost us a couple million more.
Wow.
and we don't have one. So we have an assistant, right? We have an assistant that's sitting in right now. She's doing a great job, very, very capable. And they've hired a firm to do a search, and we're paying them $50,000 to look for somebody.
Wow.
Who that is, we don't know.
All of that money, right? This is all this is public tax dollar money that is going down the drain because people had a split second knee jerk emotional reaction and couldn't figure out how to authentically solve a problem, and so they just hit the nail with a hammer, right?
And I'll this is the way I put it to people. They've weaponized our school district to fight Sacramento, right? So there's a couple things at play here. They don't like some of the issues that are happening in Sacramento. There's a whole bunch of new assembly bills that just went through regarding banning books. AB 1078 by Corey Jackson that just got signed by the governor, which is great. But even me, who's politically probably pretty far left, AB 1078 is pretty heavy. Like, it's pretty much saying you can't ban books unless you ask us. And it's for local governance, that's a little heavy. But it's necessary, right? And essentially what they're doing, they've accumulated at least 2 lawsuits. They're being investigated by the state. They've paid out in the last 3 months $93,000 in legal bills. Like, the average month is $3,500 a month on legal fees. They're spending $31,000 a month just on legal. So they're weaponizing TVUSD to fight a state level battle, right? And so what we're saying is, listen, man, use your own money to do this. We stop using our taxpayer money to fight Sacramento. It's like accumulating 25 seatbelt tickets and saying it's because I don't like the seatbelt law. Well, that's not how it works. And nothing gets changed by doing this. The bigger picture is, obviously, to me, and our opinion here is, ultimately the goal is to defund public education, dismantle and defund public education. That's what it is.
Did you just see that comment, or are you responding? No. Just okay. That's perfect, because the comment was,
that's what
you all feel like the long game is here. So go ahead.
It's dismantle and defund public education. It's happening in other states already. We just posted a Time story about charter schools and how they only hurt students, and some of the data that's coming out is just horrific as far as education, exclusionatory practices by these private schools, the non-oversight and the abuse that's happening. And that's what they want. They want to get rid of public education here, and they're going to use us and the millions of dollars that we pay into it to try to fight Sacramento. It's not going to work, and not in this state. It's just not. And right. I mean, we're talking about a 50-year battle to turn this state red. It's not going to happen. The demo's not there for them. So meanwhile, we burn,
Is anyone shouting, what about the children? Like, like you said so many things, and none of them, right, had to do with, like, how are our children? Are they socially, emotionally okay? Are they academically okay? Like, are they growing into world citizens? Like, what? So then,
Well-
while you're saying everything, I'm like, listen, as parents, from a parental perspective, I'm like, yo, forget these systems. Like, again, y'all heard me say this before. I expect very basic things from the school system, and it just makes me think more about like, okay, so how much more like parental empowerment conversations do we need to have? Because I feel like that's the only way the truth will be told. And I think gone are the days where we really could trust the school system. And I know it's not that necessarily across, you know, the world. I know that there are some, you know, schools doing the right thing. However, like, I think in days past, we've gotten to a place where we thought, you know, we can relinquish a lot of our, you know, parental rights to the school because they're going to do right by our kids. We're going to show up to these meetings and, you know, we'll share whatever, but the school's got good intention. Now it's like, what the heck? And maybe it always was, but it's just more clear now that this is not about children. The whole education is not about children. It's about politics. It's about these arguments. It's about pride. It's about ego. And I don't see any change in sight. I feel like the only way to turn this around is by parents advocating, you know, for their children. And if it's not working in these board meetings, it can definitely work at home, where you have the space and the grace to say what the heck you want and teach your kids the stuff that you want your kids to know. And I know it works on the other side for the ignorance, for the people that feed ignorance and want to teach those things. But I feel like that's the only solution here, because the school boards and the districts are just in many ways wronging children.
Well, are we in the general conversation part? I wanted to make sure that we were.
I don't know.
No, you're fine.
We're good. Yeah, we're good.
The reason I said that because I wanted to add on to what I want to respond to you, but I didn't want to take anything away from our guests. I put the list back up because I think this is about kids. It's about whose kids. Asian kids are doing well there. I don't know how loud or quiet they are, but I can assume by basically what I see, like, probably don't need to jump in that fight either way. White kids are doing decent. They had the steepest drop in COVID, but I don't know if Temecula is the place where Black and brown kids are going to necessarily be the priority of what's necessarily happening, right? So when Vita and Miss Toya and you ask, well, what about the kids? I think that's the wrong question. It's like, well, what about these white kids and what about these other kids? And I think that around white kids, you have a populace of people who are not about to be the majority for much longer. Things are shifting. They feel like they're losing the country. They don't want their kids coming home and asking them if, mommy, are you a racist or whatever the case is, right? Like, they don't want to hear these stories, because if you hear about Harvey Milk, you're going to go home and ask some questions about Harvey Milk in this story. You know what I mean? I think, and Jeff, I think you and I might disagree around, you know, charter schools or the use of having academic choice or whatnot, but there's a very different reason, right? Like, I'm not in Temecula, and even in Temecula, them Black kids and them brown kids is performing way down here. If I'm gonna go, if 3 out of, what is it? It's 1 out of 3 Black people see a jail cell, and education and literacy is a big part of that. Like, I shouldn't have to be trapped in my local school that probably isn't doing what it needs to do or whatever the case is, right? So
you're right.
So I think so for me, it's like, if I want to choose that neighborhood school down the street, I want to choose that. But if I want a different opportunity and I can't afford that private school, I want this as well, right? So, but I think that's the larger question. Like, and this is a playbook all around the country. When I was in undergrad, I read a book that said, "What's the Matter with Kansas?" And the book was essentially about white people that voted against their interests. But here's how racism works. There's people that are powerful, people got money, people got influence, and I lived in Kentucky as well. There's a lot of poor white people in Kentucky, but here's the thing. I can keep them at bay as long as they still feel like they better than these Black people. And like, so that is why a lot of people were voting against their interests when it didn't necessarily make sense. I think that this is fascinating. I think that, again, I think that you're seeing a lot of people that feel like they are losing power. We are an empire. The United States is an empire. No empire teaches kids to go against the empire. So when you are
Right.
doing these things and saying, if they read something and it's interpreted that our populace is racist, our populace is wrong, or whatever the case is, I think they like, this got to go. And people from Kansas, people from all these other places, from Texas or whatever, like you called it out, Jeff. This doesn't happen in silos. There's a national playbook. When David and I ran a pack, we got our hands on the union's playbook at the time. And it was in Chicago where I was born, and then they came to Oakland and they ran a play, right? Like, why break it if it's not, don't fix it if it's not broken. Why would I write a new legislation if the shit worked 2 states down? I'm gonna use that one. You know what I mean? So I didn't mean to take up too much space, but I think just to crystallize this for people, we keep assuming when we ask what about the children that everybody cares about everybody's children, and they fucking don't. Like, and that's really what we're talking about. Now, if you said, what about our kids? What about these black kids? What about these poor kids? Or what about these white kids? Then we would be having a very different conversation based off of how you qualified that the kid.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I love all that. And part of, I mean, even in this, I'm learning every day, right? I think Jubilee, I know I've sat in like a Twitter Spaces with you at one point and listened to people talk about these different perspectives. And I think the hard thing is to realize how big this country is, right? How every single aspect of this is just completely different. From Temecula to San Diego, it's like night and day. Orange County to Temecula is different. And you go to San Bernardino, it's a completely different saying. This is such a big country and all these different places. And I agree with you. If you asked me if there was an opportunity for a place that I would feel safe, that black kids could go to school here in Temecula and be prioritized, that if they weren't finding that at the public school level, I'm like, it doesn't exist. I don't think that exists. Whereas, and that may just be a population thing, right? Whereas more toward inner cities, there are much more of those opportunities that are, prioritizing that segment of the population. I just don't think that exists here. So if you were to take it and put it in a voucher system today, you've got several Christian schools and a few obscure charter schools to choose from. And I happen to know some of those are failing pretty miserably at the moment right now. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with that either. Right. So from our perspective, and again, we look at this like it's a local governance thing, from a Temecula thing. We have a school district where we didn't have to worry about. We had school board meetings that had nobody there. They were just nobody. Nobody showed up. Nobody was worried about it. The kids were doing fine. And we all know it's not perfect, and we all know that different segments of the community aren't prioritized and are pushed to the back, and we all know that. And I think there was a distinct direction they were heading to try to get there, whether it's through DEI programs and things like that. And then to have that door slam shut on night one, I think is what's created all the furor here, right? You're looking at people like going, oh, wait a minute, they're going to start banning books. And our big thing is there's no such thing as, subtraction is never addition, right? And when you start taking things away and making policies, shutting down things, you're not helping people. You're not helping this community, any community, grow. You're just closing doors. And there's no way this gets better. Beyond that, we have a thriving housing market. Well, that's going to change. And we try to talk to our people all the time, like, this school district fails, the first ones that go to the charter schools and the private schools, they'll go first. So if you don't care about this, public schools are going to be the last ones to go. And when they go, your housing prices are going in the tank. And so we have a significant older population that's just now catching on to that like, oh, shoot, if, these kids aren't going to college or trade schools and they're not becoming effective members of society, then our whole city's going to tank.
Well, I think that's what Dr. Cole was referring to when people unknowingly vote against their interests. And I don't want to, I'm going to spend a minute on this, and I want to move on to the mechanics of the recall. But I do think it's interesting, and you can understand how complex these things are, because, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we were fighting in, inner city environments and in Oakland and San Francisco and elsewhere, just to ensure that young Black and brown children had a shot at something, right? Literally like a shot at an education. We weren't trying to defund public education. Many of us that were involved in the charter school movement at the time, we were accountability hawks, right? We're like, we all need more accountability, right? Public schools too. And so, that there's a lot of room between that work that we were doing versus today's, the modern day, what I like to coin is the scorched earth, no holds barred, Wild West school choice stuff that you see now, right? Including private schools and vouchers and all that. So I think that issue is quite complex, and it also obviously depends on where you are. If charter schools are new, if they're not, but that's another show. I think what I would like to hear from next and us to move into, because we're about 10 minutes in, is like what's happening now with the recall.
David.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. You want to add something, brother?
So you asked about the children, like who's looking out for the children, and that is
Sorry, David. I just want to
big.
No, it's good.
So that is the big issue right now. You have people that are running around in shirts that say "Leave our kids alone," and this idea of that all teachers and people that support public education are pedophiles and groomers and that whole thing. I've been called that. I'm a pornographer. I'm a goon. I'm a pedophile, and that was for me showing up at a state assembly meeting to support a bill that we urgently need. And so it's a tough battle, right? Like we're literally fighting a marketing battle against people that ran on parental rights and yet are taking your parental rights away. So in my opinion, when you ban a book, you remove my right to allow my child to read that book. Correct? Like that's how I read it. It's not the right of parents to restrict what other parents allow their children to read, right? So on the basic level, subtraction is not addition. You're not adding something, you're taking it away. And so we in a school district of 23,000 people, we're fighting that battle, Jubilee. Like we're having that messaging battle with people. Like we care, but we want the kids to have every opportunity available to them, all of them, from the top to the bottom. And I come from like a sports background. I used to run basketball leagues, and my theory was always, if the worst kid on the worst team had the best time, everybody else was good. That's not the way they govern this. They're governed this in that I'm doing what my voters asked me to do, right? And so that's the way it's being governed, and that's why it's trouble. You're governing from the top down, essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's a battle we're having, Jubilee. Like, what about the kids? It's almost a dangerous thing to start talking about the kids, because it's like, well, what about all those pedophiles? And I'm like, oh my God.
It's similar to like what you heard from this is like the messaging that you heard from Trump, right? Where he was elected by a particular group of people, and he governed for those people, as opposed to politicians that maybe are elected by 20, 30, 40% of the electorate, but they recognize that they must govern for 100%, right?
That's service.
You see this messaging kind of like trickling down now to the local level of school boards. That's
exactly it. So I just wanted to get that in. It's such a tricky thing to talk about, but we're trying to take that back and making those points. And I don't know how effective we are, but I think it's starting to hit home when you just see things coming away.
Yeah. So what are the so what's happening now with the recall? Like, what are your timelines? I think recalls I think they've always been around. I don't even know if recalls are allowed in every state. It might be a state by state thing. And we have several in California there's a couple in California that are happening now. They just, a different group won a recall in San Francisco a couple years ago against school board members for different reasons, right? But it's still the same mechanism, the recall. So what are your next steps in this recall effort?
So we had to start, we had I forget what it's like, a 6-month clock, basically. And so we had to go out and get petitions to, say we want to do a recall, and there's enough people to say we want to do a recall. And some of the recall things have changed in California. Now we have to gather basically 4,500 signatures for each one, which would be as many, I think, more than voted, maybe, or close then, for each one. So If we get that number and they're approved, they will then be the registrar of voters will then call a special election. We're hoping it's during the March primaries for optimal, turnout. And if we get one of them, and then the community has to vote again to recall them. So we put them on the ballot as a yes or a no vote, and then the community has to show up again to vote them out. And then, obviously, if we get one, we have a split board. They can appoint in the meantime. I think it comes in pretty well. No, they can't. So they probably wouldn't. And it would just go to the election as a 2-2, in 2024 to fill that seat. We've got 3 of them up. One is pretty close. I'm crossing my fingers. We have 25 people out walking tonight. We had 20 out walking last night. We had 100 over the weekend. So we have people are fired up to get this done. And then once we get one, we'll go get the other one. And we'll go from there. And hopefully we'll have 2 up to vote. And then we have a whole nother, that's the thing with the PAC. You got to have money to do this, right? So we're constantly, that's part of my job is figuring out fun ways to fundraise and continue this money flow, because we've got to then campaign to get people to push that yes recall vote.
How much money has George Soros given your PAC? No.
He can't stop. I actually introduced him on Saturday. I was like, George Soros. Oh, he didn't. No, it's we literally have one large donor, and I won't say who that is, but it's pretty funny. So I'll tell you offline. But everything else is we sell yard signs. I made tombstone recall yard signs for the Halloween decorations, right? So it matches your Halloween decorations, and people are buying T-shirts and stickers and buttons, and it's really that. I mean, it's people saying hey, can you use $300? Yeah, I can always use $300 because we've probably printed for Komrovsky I'd say probably 12,000 petitions.
Oh wow!
And we need, and each petition has 7 signature spots on it, and so that's a ton of signatures. But we've got hundreds of people out in the community standing in front of grocery stores that are getting 5 and 10. So we're going to figure out a way to get a petition in everybody's hands and get them to go out and knock on every single door, and figure out a way to somehow get to 4,500, and then we'll go to the next one. And it's tough. I mean, again. Most local communities in smaller neighborhoods like this have never had to worry about their city council member ending up on Stephen Colbert's show because she compared herself to Rosa Parks for having to wear a mask, right? But that happened here. So we've never had to worry about that. You could be an incumbent and just roll the ball out basically, and everybody knows your name, everything seems fine at school, reelected.
Then when you see her, ask her if she knows who Claudette Colvin is. After that,
she doesn't. She's gotten worse since then. So
yes.
So we got that on that front. So we got 2024. We got things in place for her that we're spending time on. So it's a lot. It's a big issue. And none of us have ever done it, right? We're all sort of learning here. And as much as people like to say the George Soros thing as a joke, we don't have a team of people that are coming in from DC to help us do this, or Gavin Newsom. And they said Gavin Newsom was funding this, or directing this. I'm like, I don't talk to him. I haven't talked to any of them. Nobody calls me.
He's like, I'd welcome it. I wish that were true, but that's just not. It just isn't.
Even to this point, and I've said this to local Democrats, to regional Democrats, and to the state, listen, if you're going to come and drop a bomb and fix this, do it. I'm all for it. If you got something at the state level that's going to fix it, drop it. Otherwise, don't come in here with the politics, right? Because when you come in here with the politics and say start making noise like Gavin Newsom did, it galvanizes people and it turns people away, and it makes us look like we're working in conjunction, and we're not. Mm-hmm. We're literally teachers and parents, or former parents in my case, and we're just trying to figure this out and get it done.
It's a grassroots democracy in action, is what it sounds like to me.
Which is why it's maddening when people start to threaten them and intimidate like they did this last weekend. They're screaming at him you're yelling at an American doing something that Americans should be doing, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, but it's troubling some of the the behavior from some of these people that are fellow Americans that are
Yep.
threatening little old ladies for gathering signatures. Like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a
That's
foundational premise of what our
Yeah,
country is supposed to
that's-
stand for, right?
democracy. That's
Right,
what it is.
right. Wow. Okay, we are amazingly up on time, but I wanted to give a minute or two to Jubilee and Charles to provide some closing thoughts, and for you too, Jeff, and then also think about different ways that we can support you. Obviously, if you want to use any of this content and clip it for your social medias or whatever, that's available to you. But we just wanted to take the time to kind of shine a light on what's happening there, and what I'm walking away with is that I think two things: that this democracy in action and like real grassroots movement is what I'm taking away from it, and also just the gravity and magnitude of the lift. But it sounds like, I mean, obviously you are committed, others in the community are committed, and it sounds like you have a growing movement. And again, this is like long game work. Politics is not like, you don't change people's hearts and minds overnight. And so I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. We don't always all have to agree on every issue. But when people organize and stand up and fight for what they fundamentally believe is right from within organically, we have to stand for that. So I commend you for your work.
Thank you. It's a whole bunch of us. It's a learning process for me every single day. Like, where I was 4 months ago is not where I am today. So we're learning. We're getting there. We're going to try to figure it out.
All right, Jubilee.
My question is still the same. What about the children? You already know. And yeah, let's look at the black and brown, but let's look at the white children, because those are the ones y'all care about, right? So let's start there. Let's at least ground our conversation in some form of data, and not emotion, and not politics, and not religion. And like Dave said, I salute you, Jeff. Thanks for all the work. I hope that you get, some more allies. I hope that people in other places, begin to rise up. I'm sure they have. I just don't know who they are yet. We need the anti Moms for Liberty, and the anti all the people that oppose that kind of thinking. But yeah, I salute you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And I really hope that whoever else, joins in will be able to light that spark in these rooms and spaces to be like, what about the children? I think that to me is always going to be my question, because we have gotten so far away from keeping the main thing. Like, I don't know, like if I was to start a group, I'd walk in there with a bunch of childhood pictures. Like, this is what the heck we're talking about. This is what is at stake, their futures. You guys with your egos and your pride and all this other stuff are basically destroying our future. Like, and that's how I feel about it. So what about the children? And parents, teach your kids what you want them to know. Now, I know that goes both ways, and we have the
I was gonna say, because that's what they're doing. They absolutely teaching their kids what they want to know.
But guess what? And we should too. Like, we should too. I don't think that power is ever going to well, let me not say that. I think that the power does lie where we were teaching our children these things at home. Like, I know that that's how racism is also continued. But I think that as Black and brown people, we have more power than we probably realize. And I do think that it is time for us to teach our children what we want them to know, teach them their history or whatever, and not wait for the school district or any other entity to do it.
Cool.
I want to say thank you to our guest, man. Excellent guest. Jeff, you have an open invitation. You're always welcome here. I would love to even talk about some of those other issues where we might not be in lock and step, but on this one, we definitely are. And but I get it. I just understand the rules of war. I just understand the rules of empire. I think that, people look at their kids as their legacy, and there are people that this country means something different to them. And in it, there's the people that are in power look a certain type of way, and they believe certain type of things. And there's a group of people whose population is dwindling, and some of them feel like that's indicative of them losing control. And I can also even say honestly as well, as somebody who is somewhat left on this topic or whatever, my side doesn't always help. There are examples where you see stuff where it's like, I did see something the other day, which I think played right into the hands of those people you're fighting against, Jeff, where, you know, a teacher was having kids do this exercise coming out the closet in like the 2nd or 3rd grade. And it's just like, that's not helping anything. I don't know what this activity is. I think that if you ever study empires and there's a moment right before an empire fails, and they've all failed. Like, by the way, like the Roman Empire has failed. The Chinese dynasties have failed. Like they all have like a shelf life, but I feel like we're entering into that space where, you know, our empire is struggling. And people are scared about that for whatever that means. I think this issue and how you talk about it. And again, I love that question. I mean, I was on A Black Hands. Sharif's thing is, how are the children? What about the children? And I get the spirit of it, but I think it's just too vague because everybody don't give a damn about your kids. They care about their kids. They care about what they believe. Try, if you don't believe me, try to canvass random neighborhoods for funding for kids. And if them people ain't got kids or they kids is good, they gonna be like, you don't get the F off my doorstep right now. Like, I don't plan to do that, right? Like, people say a lot of things, but if you look where their money goes and where their attention goes, you'll learn a lot of stuff. Listen, for anybody out there, the way Jeff has just shown what grassroots organizing looks like. It's very difficult, it's very hard, it's very painstaking. It is yeoman's work, and it is often unheralded. It is often, it is a very tough time. David and I can speak to that from just experience, like being persona non grata with very, very powerful entities where they're calling you names. And Jeff took it like a G, and he said it like it didn't bother him. But I'm sure there were some names that he was called. That man has children. That man has a family. Like, I'm sure there were times he wanted to lose it on some people, but he can't because of the position that he's in. So, you know, I give you that. And to my community, what I would say is this, man. I think there is a time where you do have to be somewhat selfish. This is where I fully agree with Jubilee. You have to teach your own history in your household. You cannot expect a public system to do that solely. We would like for them to be in the right direction of it, but as Vita pointed out, since the inception of traditional public education after Brown versus Board, it has been very, very, very bad for Black people. It just has been. It's just been terrible. Even in Brown versus Board, which a lot of people don't understand, you know, it gets heralded and praised, but that was effectively the end of Black teachers. Like, we still have not recovered from the mass firing of those Black teachers, right? Like this, but you have to understand politics for that. So you've been a part of the South Star Classroom, man. I think these kind of conversations where you get these different perspectives are great. And I'm gonna throw it back to David, who put together an incredible and amazing, educational, fruitful show. So David, thank you again. And take us home, boss.
Yeah. Jeff, I wanted to offer you if you have closing thoughts or anything important that you weren't able to say, how can we support you? The floor is yours before we close.
Okay, thank you very much. Listen, I really appreciate this, guys. And contrary to what you might think, like, no, we don't talk to a lot of groups that are from across the country. We just don't. For the most part, it's been us. Like, we talk to a lot of press. Talking to you guys today has been important. I sit in a lot of rooms on my own. I get invited to things and listen to, different groups, but it's trial and error. And like you said, Dr. Cole, it's like, a lot of this is embarrassing, right? You think something's going to go, you think something's going to work, and then it doesn't work. And you're like, oh man, this is me, right? This is my pitch, and we're trying to make this go. And it's very humbling. But it is, I will say this. The hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have joined our groups and followed us on Instagram, social media, Facebook, getting to know my community the way I know my community now has been incredible, right? So the long term, and what I know is going to be a long-term endeavor in this community, because we don't need to go away. Like, we're not going to recall somebody and leave. It doesn't end here. We're not this rash of an attempted takeover is not going to stop for a while. Mm-hmm. So we know that we want to have a say in our local governance. And I will say, I'm incredibly grateful for all the people that have stepped up and walked alongside of us, people that I meet every single week that are like, yeah, we're going to go do this. We need to get this done. I want to be a part of this. We're awake now. And that's just been overwhelming, like emotionally for me.
Mhm.
But you know, from a politics standpoint, I hope, and try to be an optimist. I hope our country gets better because of this. And I know some of this is a blip, but I also know that a lot of people are learning that local government really matters in the impacts your life immediately, where they didn't maybe understand that before or didn't have a reason to understand it. And when you have people coming in with mantras like following the Seven Mountains Mandate and some of that stuff, and they're trying to take over these school districts and city councils and turn them into, you know, whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it evangelical havens or conservative, taking it back 100 years, whatever that is, that's dangerous. And I think we all need to be more active in our local governance. And I think that'll be a byproduct of this. We may not see it for a while. We may not, but I think I'm hopeful that we'll be better Americans and more productive Americans and participatory Americans because of it.
Wow. All right. I'm not going to mess up your words because you closed it very eloquently. Thank you very much for joining us today. Best of luck to you in your recall effort. And thanks for joining everybody. South Star Classroom episode 115 today. We'll be back next week with the full crew. And that's it. Have a great day.